Another day, another stack of exchange student applications. Administrator Klix'mar of the Galactic University settled into his ergonomic hover chair, tentacles wrapped around his morning stimulant beverage. The fluid tasted like disappointment mixed with bureaucracy, but it kept him functional enough to process the endless parade of eager young beings seeking higher education. "Let's see what we have today," he muttered, scanning through the holographic displays. Cephirian honor student, check. Crystalloid prodigy, naturally. Worth and Noble's offspring, of course. The applications blurred together in a symphony of predictable excellence and family connections. Then he saw it. Species, human. Planet of origin, Earth. Sol system, outer rim. Klix'mar paused, his secondary eyes focusing on the unfamiliar designation. Earth? He cross-referenced the galactic database, and his morning beverage suddenly tasted even worse. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me." The planetary profile loaded with all the enthusiasm of a funeral march. Climate, variable and hostile. Gravity, 1.2 times galactic standard. Atmospheric composition, highly oxidizing. Natural disasters, frequent and creative. Dominant species, apparently determined to prove survival of the fittest through sheer stubborn refusal to die. But it was the historical records that made Klix'mar's tentacles curl in disbelief. War count, 7,432 major conflicts in the last 5,000 years, he read aloud, his voice climbing an octave. That's more than one war per year. How is that even mathematically possible? He scrolled through the timeline, watching conflicts flash by like a demented slideshow. World War I, World War II, Napoleonic Wars, 100 Years' War, 30 Years' War, Cold War. The list continued with the relentless persistence of a cosmic joke. They named a war after being cold? What's next? The Great Sandwich Conflict. The database helpfully provided casualty figures that made Klix'mar's chromatophores shift to a sickly green hue. 60 million dead in one war alone. And they called it the Good War? What in the 17 hells do they call the bad ones? He leaned back, processing this information with the growing horror of someone who had just realized they were sharing an elevator with a known explosive. No species survives this level of self-destruction. It's biologically impossible. The psychological trauma alone should have rendered them extinct eons ago. Yet here was an application from one Maya Thompson, age 19, requesting admission to the xenobiology program. Her academic records were surprisingly normal, her recommendation letters glowing, and her personal statements spoke of wanting to learn about different life forms and maybe figure out why everyone seems so fragile compared to humans. Everyone seems so fragile compared to humans. Klix'mar read that line 3 times, each reading making his auxiliary heart skip a beat. The casual arrogance of it was breathtaking. Here was a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of creative destruction, and they thought everyone else was fragile. "This has to be some kind of clerical error," he muttered, pulling up the verification protocols. But no, the application had been processed through proper channels, complete with genetic verification and psychological evaluation, and the human was, by all accounts, genuine. He scrolled through Maya Thompson's personal information, looking for red flags. Born in a place called Detroit, which the database unhelpfully tagged as economically challenged urban environment with elevated crime statistics. Hobbies included something called rock climbing, which appeared to involve scaling vertical surfaces for fun, and contact sports, which sounded ominous in ways that made his translator circuits spark. "They climb rocks. For entertainment," Klix'mar said to his empty office. "A species that has spent 5,000 years perfecting warfare climbs rocks when they're bored." The financial aid section nearly made him fall out of his chair. Maya Thompson was requesting a standard student loan to cover tuition and living expenses. She had listed her family's annual income in what appeared to be their local currency, and after conversion, it came out to roughly what a Galactic University janitor might earn in a slow month. So not only are they indestructible war machines, they're also poor, he observed. Wonderful. Just wonderful. The smart thing to do would be to reject the application, file it under species too dangerous for educational environment, and move on to safer prospects. The insurance alone would be astronomical. What if she accidentally killed someone during orientation? What if her mere presence triggered some kind of post-traumatic stress response in the other students? But then again, Klix'mar found himself genuinely curious. In his 47 years of academic administration, he had never encountered a species quite like this. The scientific value alone could justify the risk. Plus, if she somehow survived the application process, she might actually provide some insight into how a species could be so catastrophically self-destructive and yet still manage to produce functional university students. Besides, he said, reaching for his approval stamp, what's the worst that could happen? The words hung in the air like a challenge to the universe itself. Klix'mar paused, stamp hovering over the application, suddenly aware that he might be making the kind of decision that future administrators would study as a cautionary tale. Then he shrugged and brought the stamp down with a decisive thunk. Approved. Maya Thompson, welcome to Galactic University. May the cosmos have mercy on us all. 3 weeks later, Maya Thompson arrived at Galactic University with the kind of punctuality that suggested either exceptional organization or military conditioning. Given her species' history, Klix'mar suspected the latter. She appeared in his office doorway at precisely 1400 hours, clutching a datapad and wearing what he assumed was formal human attire. "Hi there, I'm Maya," she announced with the kind of cheerful energy that made Klix'mar's tertiary nervous system twitch. "I brought my medical records like you requested. Fair warning, though, it's kind of a thick file." Kind of thick turned out to be the understatement of the galactic cycle. The datapad she handed over contained what appeared to be a comprehensive documentation of human durability testing disguised as a childhood medical history. Klix'mar activated his privacy screens and settled in for what he assumed would be a routine review. Standard vaccinations, perhaps a few minor injuries, maybe an appendectomy if the species was particularly unlucky. He opened the first entry and immediately regretted every life choice that had led him to this moment. Age 3. Fractured left radius and ulna after falling from playground equipment. Treatment, cast for 6 weeks, full recovery expected. Klix'mar blinked at the screen. Playground equipment? They have equipment designed for children that breaks bones? He scrolled down. Age 4. Concussion from collision with stationary object during recreational running. Treatment, observation for 24 hours, cleared for normal activities. Normal activities, he repeated slowly. At age 4. After brain trauma. The entries continued with the relentless consistency of a cosmic horror novel. Age 5. Brought a dislocated shoulder from something called monkey bars, which sounded like equipment designed by sadists. Age 6 featured stitches from a bicycle accident, because apparently humans had invented wheeled death traps for their offspring to navigate. Age 7. Second-degree burns on right hand from touching hot stove. Patient stated curiosity about temperature. Treatment, topical ointments, bandaging, safety lecture apparently ignored. Klix'mar paused his reading to check Maya's current condition. She sat across from his desk, looking perfectly intact, despite having survived what appeared to be a childhood spent in active combat with her environment. She was even smiling, which struck him as either admirable resilience or concerning brain damage. "The bicycle accidents," he said carefully, "how many are listed here?" "Oh, just 4 or 5 major ones," Maya replied with a shrug that would have been casual if it weren't attached to someone whose medical history read like a trauma surgeon's nightmare. "Most kids crash their bikes a few times learning to ride. It's pretty normal." Normal. She kept using that word. Klix'mar returned to the records with growing fascination and horror. Age 8. Fractured tibia from tree climbing expedition. Age 9. 12 stitches from attempting to pet unfamiliar animal. Age 10. Severe allergic reaction to bee sting during outdoor exploration. "You were stung by a venomous insect and nearly died," he observed. "Well, yeah, but we figured out I was allergic, so now I carry an EpiPen." Problem solved. Maya's cheerful pragmatism was starting to make Klix'mar's eye twitch. He continued reading, each entry more alarming than the last. A broken wrist from skateboard experimentation. A sprained ankle from improper landing during trampoline use. Something called food poisoning from questionable cafeteria selection. Your educational institutions serve poisonous food? Not on purpose, Maya said, as if that clarification somehow made it better. School lunch just isn't great. You build up immunity after a while. Build up immunity to poison, served to children. Klix'mar set down the data pad and pulled up comparative medical records from other species. The average Zephyrian student's medical history consisted of routine health maintenance and perhaps one minor injury over their entire educational career. Crystalloids rarely suffered anything more serious than optical recalibration. Even the notoriously clumsy bloblings had medical files that looked positively sterile compared to this catalog of human destruction. Let me understand this correctly, he said, his voice climbing toward panic frequencies. You have personally survived multiple bone fractures, head trauma, burns, poisoning, allergic reactions, and what appears to be active combat with your planet's wildlife. And you consider this normal? Pretty standard, yeah. I mean, I never broke anything really serious like my spine or skull. And I've never needed surgery, which is lucky. My cousin Jake had his appendix out when he was 12, and my friend Tyler got hit by a car when we were 15. But he only needed physical therapy for like 6 months. Hit by a car. Physical therapy for 6 months. Only. Klix'mar's chromatophores were cycling through colors that didn't have names in any known language. He pulled up the university's insurance documentation, cross-referencing human durability with liability coverage. The numbers that appeared on his screen made him wonder if early retirement was still an option. The insurance company is going to have questions, he said weakly. About what? What? About everything. About the fact that your species considers traumatic brain injury a minor inconvenience. About the casual acceptance of broken bones as childhood milestones. About the way you seem to actively seek out dangerous situations for entertainment purposes. Maya tilted her head, genuinely confused. But we heal up fine. See? She rolled up her sleeve to show a faint scar along her forearm. 18 stitches from a glass cut when I was 13. Good as new? Good as new. After 18 stitches. Klix'mar realized he was hyperventilating, which was impressive considering his species didn't technically breathe. Maya. Do you understand that most species in the galaxy would consider a single broken bone a life-altering traumatic event? The ethereals file insurance claims for emotional distress if they stub their energy projections. The mollusk collective requires 3 weeks of recovery time for minor shell scratches. Huh, Maya said, processing this information with the same mild interest she might show for weather reports. That seems kind of fragile? Fragile. There was that word again? We prefer sensibly cautious, Klix'mar corrected, though his conviction was wavering. Looking at Maya's medical records, he was starting to wonder if the rest of the galaxy had been playing life on easy mode while humans had apparently been beta testing the extreme difficulty setting. He closed the medical file with trembling appendages. Maya, I need you to promise me something. While you're here at Galactic University, please try to avoid any activities that might result in documentation. You mean like getting hurt? I mean like existing in your apparently natural state of barely controlled catastrophe. Maya grinned, and Klix'mar realized with growing dread that she thought he was joking. The first incident report arrived on Klix'mar's desk at 0700 hours on Maya's 3rd day of classes. He stared at the emergency notification with the weary resignation of someone who had seen this particular disaster coming from several star systems away. Student Maya Thompson consumed Level 7 Spice Challenge meal at Central Cafeteria. A medical response team dispatched. 3 Zephyrian witnesses hospitalized for shock. 1 crystalloid required optical shielding after observing human subject's reaction. Human subject requested seconds. Klix'mar rubbed his primary temples and activated his communication device. "Get me Cafeteria Manager Blipnex. Now." The hologram that materialized looked like it had aged several cycles in the past 72 hours. Blipnex's usually pristine scales were dulled with stress, and his feeding tentacles twitched with barely contained anxiety. "Administrator Klix'mar, I can explain everything," Blipnex began before dissolving into rapid-fire panic speech. "The human approached our specialty food station, you know, the one with the warning signs in 17 languages?" She pointed at the thermal death pasta, the dish we created as a theoretical exercise in extreme cuisine, never meant for actual consumption, and she said, and I quote, "That looks tasty. Can I get extra sauce?" "Extra sauce," Klix'mar repeated flatly. "Extra sauce." I tried to warn her, showed her the safety protocols, the liability waivers, the medical emergency procedures. She laughed, administrator. She laughed, and signed everything without reading it. Klix'mar pulled up the cafeteria's security footage, watching Maya approach the food station with the casual confidence of someone who had never met a meal that could fight back. The thermal death pasta sat under multiple warning signs, enclosed in a containment field that registered temperatures hot enough to melt most known metals. She ate the entire portion in under 5 minutes, Blipnex continued, his voice rising to frequencies that made nearby equipment whine. The Zephyrians at the next table started convulsing just from watching. We had to evacuate a 12-meter radius. She asked if we had any milk to cool down her mouth, then settled for ice water when we explained that milk wasn't compatible with her biology. The footage showed Maya calmly finishing her meal while emergency crews established a perimeter around her table. She appeared to be enjoying herself, occasionally pausing to wave at the growing crowd of horrified onlookers. "Did she show any signs of distress?" Klix'mar asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. She complimented the chef and asked about the recipe. Said it reminded her of her grandmother's cooking, except not quite as spicy. Not quite as spicy. Klix'mar made a mental note to investigate human grandmothers as potential weapons of mass destruction. The second incident report arrived before he could finish processing the first one. This time it was from the recreation complex, where Maya had apparently discovered the gravity adjustment chambers. The facility was designed to help students from different worlds acclimate to galactic standard gravity, with settings ranging from 0.1 to 2.0 times standard. Maya had set it to maximum and started doing something called jumping jacks. The structural integrity alarms activated after she had been exercising for 20 minutes, Recreation Director Klix'mar reported via emergency transmission. "We thought there was a seismic event. Turns out it was just one human doing cardiovascular exercise." She asked if we could increase the gravity setting because 2 times standard was a bit light for a proper workout. A bit light. For a proper workout. By the end of Maya's first week, Klix'mar's incident report files had expanded to the point where they required their own dedicated storage system. Maya had somehow managed to accidentally break the atmospheric adjustment chamber by breathing too enthusiastically during what she called a light jog. The machine wasn't designed to process the oxygen consumption rates of a species that could apparently survive in hostile environments through sheer lung capacity. Terrify the botanical studies class by correctly identifying which plants were poisonous by smell alone, then casually mentioning that humans often consumed many of these deadly plants as recreational snacks. 3 students required counseling after she ate what they considered a lethal dose of what humans apparently called hot peppers. Cause a campus-wide alert during basic safety protocols when she volunteered to demonstrate proper response to toxic gas exposure. The professor had released a harmless but foul-smelling compound designed to trigger evacuation instincts. Maya sniffed it and commented that it wasn't as bad as New Jersey. The final straw came during Interspecies Cultural Exchange Week. Maya had been paired with Quiblet, a gentle mollusk who specialized in conflict resolution through interpretive dance. The assignment was simple: share a traditional food from your homeworld. Maya brought something called ghost pepper salsa and homemade tortilla chips. Quiblet spent 3 days in the medical wing after one microscopic taste. The medical staff had to develop entirely new treatment protocols for what they were calling human food exposure syndrome. Maya, meanwhile, finished the entire container while visiting Quiblet in the hospital, apologizing profusely for bringing the mild stuff. Administrator, Maya said, appearing in his office doorway with the punctuality that had become both reassuring and terrifying. I think there might be some kind of mix-up with the difficulty settings here. Klix'mar looked up from his incident reports, noting absently that his stress indicators had achieved colors previously thought to be theoretical. Difficulty settings? Everything seems really easy. The gravity's light, the food's bland, the exercise equipment can't handle basic human activity levels. It's like this place was designed for. She paused, searching for the right words. Sensible beings who prefer to survive their educational experience? Klix'mar suggested. I was going to say beings made of tissue paper, but sure, that works too. Klix'mar stared at her, this cheerful agent of chaos who had managed to terrorize an entire university simply by existing at her normal operational parameters. Maya, has it occurred to you that perhaps humans are the unusual ones in this scenario? She considered this for a moment. Nah, that doesn't make sense. We're perfectly normal. Everyone else is just really, really fragile. And there it was again. That word that was starting to haunt Klix'mar's dreams. He reached for his emergency medication and wondered if the university's insurance policy covered nervous breakdowns in academic administrators. The emergency alert that shattered Klix'mar's peaceful morning came from the physical education complex, was accompanied by seismic readings that suggested either a minor earthquake or the complete structural failure of the gymnasium. Given recent events, he suspected it was probably Maya Thompson doing something humans considered normal. He arrived at the P complex to find it surrounded by emergency vehicles, medical personnel, and a crowd of students who appeared to be suffering from various degrees of shock. Professor Grim Knock, the facility's head of physical assessment, stood in the center of the chaos looking like someone who had just witnessed the heat death of the universe. What happened? Klix'mar demanded, though part of him really didn't want to know. The human happened, Grim Knock replied in the flat tone of someone whose worldview had recently been shattered and reassembled incorrectly. She took her mandatory fitness assessment. Klix'mar's primary heart sank. Please tell me she at least tried to hold back. She said she was going easy because she didn't want to show off. Grimnock gestured toward the gymnasium doors, which were currently sealed with emergency containment barriers. She broke the strength measurement device. Not damaged, administrator. Broke. The machine that's designed to measure the lifting capacity of heavy gravity species? She exceeded its maximum settings while apologizing for being out of shape. Of course she was out of shape. Klix'mar pushed through the crowd to get a better view of the damage. Through the reinforced windows, he could see the remnants of what had once been the university's pride and joy, a comprehensive fitness assessment system capable of measuring the physical capabilities of over 300 known species. The strength measurement platform looked like it had been hit by a small meteor. The endurance monitor was displaying error messages in languages that hadn't been used since the Galactic Dark Ages. Something that might have once been the agility course was now twisted into shapes that violated several laws of physics. She started with the basic strength assessment, Professor Grimnock continued, his voice taking on the distant quality of someone recounting a traumatic event. The machine asked her to grip the sensors and apply gradual pressure. She squeezed gently, according to her own description, and the feedback sensors exploded. Exploded? Literally exploded. Sparks, smoke, the whole spectacle. We had to evacuate the first 2 rows of spectators. She asked if she should try again with her other hand. Klix'mar rubbed his temples, feeling a headache developing in organs he wasn't entirely sure he possessed. What about the endurance test? She ran for 2 hours straight. Not jogged, administrator. Ran. At a pace that would be considered sprinting for most species. The machine kept increasing the difficulty, trying to find her limits. She started chatting with other students while running. asking about their majors and whether anyone wanted to grab lunch afterward. Through the window, Klix'mar could see scorch marks on the running track where the treadmill had apparently given up and caught fire. And the other students? 14 required medical attention for shock. 6 more needed psychological counseling after she mentioned this was light exercise compared to her morning routine back home. The ethereal exchange student dissipated entirely and had to be reconstituted in the medical bay. The crowd around them was growing, drawn by a mixture of morbid curiosity and the kind of fascination usually reserved for natural disasters. Klix'mar could hear whispered conversations in a dozen languages, all variations on the same theme: what kind of species produces beings like this? The flexibility assessment. Grim Knock continued, was when things got really disturbing. She completed positions that our medical staff assured me were anatomically impossible for vertebrate species. When we explained that most beings couldn't bend that way without serious injury, she offered to teach yoga classes. As if the university needed more ways for Maya to accidentally hospitalize her fellow students. Sir, a medical technician approached, clutching a data pad with shaking appendages. We've completed the analysis of the human's performance metrics. You're going to want to see this. Klix'mar accepted the pad and immediately wished he hadn't. The numbers displayed were beyond anything in the university's records. Strength measurements that exceeded those of heavy gravity species. Endurance ratings that surpassed desert survival specialists. Reaction times that made the university's combat training instructors look sluggish. According to these readings, the technician continued, the human was operating at approximately 60% of her maximum capacity. She mentioned she's been slacking off lately due to her studies. Slacking off at 60% capacity, while breaking equipment designed to challenge the galaxy's most physically capable species. There's more, Professor Grimnock added, his voice barely above a whisper. After she finished the assessment, she asked if we had any real challenges. Said this reminded her of elementary school P class, except easier and with less running. Less running in elementary school. Klix'mar stared at the devastated gymnasium, then at the growing crowd of traumatized students and faculty, then at his data pad full of impossible numbers. In the distance, he could hear Maya's cheerful voice asking someone if they knew where she could find a good place to exercise since the gym was temporarily closed for repairs. Cancel all my appointments, he told his assistant. Call an emergency staff meeting. Full faculty, all department heads, and someone from the insurance company. What should I tell them the meeting is about? Klix'mar looked once more at the wreckage that had once been their state-of-the-art fitness facility, destroyed by one human who considered herself out of shape. Tell them we need to discuss whether our species classifications might need some serious revision. And ask someone to look into the possibility of relocating Maya Thompson to a planet with higher gravity. And for everyone's safety. As he walked away, he could hear Maya in the distance, apparently having found some maintenance stairs to climb. She was taking them 3 at a time while humming something she called Eye of the Tiger, whatever that meant. The emergency staff meeting was scheduled for 1400 hours. Klix'mar had a feeling it was going to be a very long day. The emergency staff meeting had barely concluded when Professor Tixnall from the Extreme Survival Studies Department burst into Klix'mar's office, clutching a grading pad like it contained the secrets of the universe. Administrator, we have a situation, Tixnall announced, his usually composed demeanor cracked around the edges. It's about the human student. Klix'mar didn't even look up from his incident reports. What did she break this time? Nothing. That's the problem. Tixnall set his grading pad on the desk with trembling appendages. She's excelling. Excelling in ways that are making my other students question their life choices. This was unexpected. Klix'mar finally looked up, noting that Tixnall appeared to be suffering from some form of existential crisis. Excelling how? She's taking my Advanced Survival Under Extreme Conditions course. It's designed to be the most challenging class in the curriculum. We simulate deadly scenarios that would eliminate most species within minutes. The course has a 70% dropout rate. And And she treats every scenario like it's a casual afternoon activity. Yesterday's simulation involved surviving in a toxic atmosphere with limited oxygen and hostile wildlife. The other students were strategizing, calculating, trying to minimize risk. Maya Thompson walked directly into the most dangerous area, befriended the hostile wildlife, and used the toxic plants to create a water purification system. Klix'mar blinked. She befriended hostile wildlife? Apparently, the simulated predators reminded her of something called neighborhood dogs back home. She said they just needed proper introduction etiquette. Klix'mar pulled up the simulation footage on his pad. Look at this. While other students are hiding and conserving resources, she's essentially having a picnic in a death zone. The footage showed Maya sitting cross-legged in what appeared to be an alien hellscape, surrounded by creatures that looked like they'd been designed by a committee of nightmares. She was hand-feeding them something she'd crafted from the local flora while chatting with them like old friends. She scored a perfect evaluation, Klix'mar continued. Not just survived, administrator, thrived. She asked if we had any harder scenarios because this one was pretty basic compared to summer camp. Summer camp. Of course, humans sent their young to survival training disguised as recreation. The other students are requesting transfers, Klix'mar added. Not because they're failing, but because Maya's casual competence is making them realize their species might not be as evolved as they thought. 3 Zephyrians filed formal complaints about unrealistic performance expectations set by the human baseline. Klix'mar rubbed his temples. What do you mean, human baseline? She keeps mentioning that she's not even good at outdoor stuff compared to her friends back home. Says her sister is the real survival expert in the family because she went to something called military school and her brother does extreme sports professionally. Military school. Extreme sports. Professionally. Professor, I need you to be very honest with me. In your expert opinion, how would an average human perform in our most challenging survival scenarios? Klix'mar considered this question with the gravity it deserved, based on Maya's performance and her repeated insistence that she's not particularly outdoorsy. I believe an average human could probably teach my advanced courses. A human survival expert could likely colonize hostile planets as a weekend hobby. Klix'mar stared at the simulation footage, thus watching Maya construct what appeared to be a functional shelter from toxic materials while the simulated wildlife brought her useful supplies. She's building a sustainable habitat in a scenario designed to kill students within 3 hours. She's planning to stay for the weekend because the sunset looks nice from here. The sunset, in a toxic death simulation, looked nice. The worst part, Klix'mar continued, is that she started offering helpful tips to other students. Practical advice like just grab the dangerous animals behind their neck things and most poisonous stuff tastes bitter. So avoid anything that doesn't. Yesterday, she prevented a crystalloid from making a fatal mistake by casually mentioning that the glowing mushrooms are probably radioactive, just like back home. Just like back home, where glowing mushrooms were apparently a casual environmental hazard. Professor, I need you to do something for me, Klix'mar said, feeling the weight of administrative responsibility settling on his shoulders like a collapsing star. I need you to design a scenario that would actually challenge Maya Thompson, something that would make her work for it. Klix'mar's chromatophores shifted to a worried purple. The administrator, with respect, I don't think that's possible within the university's safety parameters. Based on her performance metrics, a scenario that would challenge her might accidentally kill everyone else in the building. Then what do you suggest? Maybe we could ask her to teach a basic survival course. Call it survival skills for extremely fragile species or something that won't hurt her feelings. Klix'mar looked at his calendar, noting with growing dread that Maya still had 3 more years of university ahead of her. Professor Klix'mar, I think we need to have a very serious conversation about whether our academic standards are appropriate for a species that considers military training a normal childhood experience. Already ahead of you, Administrator. I'm redesigning the entire curriculum. New working title, How to Not Die Immediately, a Non-Human Perspective. Later that evening, Klix'mar sat alone in his office, surrounded by incident reports, insurance claims, and what appeared to be a formal request from the engineering department to study Maya's bone density for structural inspiration. The day's events had given him time to think, which was proving to be a dangerous activity. He pulled up Maya's homeworld data again, but this time he looked beyond the war statistics. He examined the environmental factors, the evolutionary pressures, the sheer hostile creativity of a planet that seemed determined to eliminate its dominant species through every method imaginable. Natural disasters that would sterilize most worlds were apparently weather on Earth. Predators that could hunt galactic apex species were wildlife. Diseases that could devastate star systems were childhood illnesses that humans developed immunity to through exposure. And then there were the wars. 7,000 years of constant conflict, each one a brutal selection pressure that eliminated anyone who wasn't adaptable enough, tough enough, or clever enough to survive. Generation after generation of humans who lived through scenarios that would make his survival simulations look like recreational activities. They're not just durable, he said aloud to his empty office. They're the end result of the galaxy's most comprehensive stress testing program. Every human wasn't just a survivor. They were the descendant of countless survivors, each one vetted by circumstances that would eliminate entire alien species. Maya Thompson wasn't an anomaly. She was exactly what you'd expect from a species that had spent millennia turning warfare into an art form and treating planetary catastrophes as background noise. The realization was both terrifying and oddly inspiring. Humans weren't tough because they were trying to be tough. They were tough because anything softer had been edited out of their gene pool by 5,000 years of enthusiastic natural selection. Klix'mar leaned back in his chair, finally understanding why Maya kept calling everyone else fragile. From her perspective, they probably were. The rest of the galaxy had evolved on relatively peaceful worlds with stable climates and reasonable predators. Humans had evolved in an environment that considered reasonable to be a sign of weakness. Well, he said, reaching for his approval stamp one more time, if you can't beat them, you might as well learn from them. He pulled up the paperwork for Maya's request to start a human cultural exchange program. Something about teaching basic life skills to interested students. Given what he'd learned about human basic anything, it would probably revolutionize the university's approach to education, or accidentally create the galaxy's most terrifying academic institution. Either way, it was going to be interesting. He stamped the approval and settled back to wait for the next inevitable disaster. After all, Maya still had 3 years of university left, and she'd mentioned something about her younger siblings applying for next semester. The galaxy, Klix'mar reflected, was about to get a lot more exciting, whether it was ready or not. The end.